one's down. We have apologies. We accept the apologies from...
Happy to move, Mr Chair.
Okay, rightio. And Councillor Cooper for an apology too, late apology. Moved by Councillor Walker, seconded by...
Sorry, Chair, I just wanted to see if Councillor Hulse, he's contacted me in regards to... Oh, sorry, there you go. I was just to make sure you got covered, Councillor Hulse.
I'm seeking a seconder, Councillor Hills. Well, excellent. All those in favour say aye.
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 Right, there are no declarations of interest that we know about. Confirmation of the minutes, please. 20th of June.
Happy to move, Mr
Councillor
Chair.
Simpson, Councillor Walker, he's on to it. All those in favour?
Aye.
There's the no petitions, no public input, no local board input, extraordinary items, none are known, and notices of motion, there are none. And we have the disposals recommendation with Anthony and Laurie and Letitia, no doubt.
Water only.
Not Anthony, Letitia.
Smart move. Smart move.
Welcome, Laurie,
Thank
and
you.
welcome, Letitia. Right.
Thank you, Mr Chair. This morning we are presenting 12 properties which we are recommending for disposal and 2 properties which we are recommending for transfer to Watercare. Consultation with council departments, CCOs, iwi authorities and the relevant local boards has been undertaken and no issues have been raised. Just to note that the 2 properties which are recommended for transfer to Watercare will occur at market value, and they will also occur in accordance with Section 50 of the Public Works Act of transfer of a public work between 2 organisations. Happy to take any questions, Mr Chair.
The Murray impact statement seems a little bit more fulsome than normal, which is good. Is there any reason? Is that just expanding things or confirming matters, or what?
Yes, Mr Chair, we have been mindful of the fact that we have not been undertaking engagement with Mātāwaka, and it's been brought to our attention that that's an area that we could potentially improve on. To that end, Brandy Hudson has met with Roger McDonald, our CE, to talk about how we can expand in that area, and we have elaborated on the Māori impact statement to include information on that, and we'll continue to amend that and elaborate as work progresses.
And the more comprehensive framework for engaging Mātāwaka will be next meeting? Or?
It will be developed over time. As a starting point, Mr Chair, as I mentioned, Roger McDonald has met with Brandy Hudson. We'll continue working with our stakeholder engagement team and working on that.
Excellent. Right, we have Councillor Hills.
Thank you, Chair. First of all, this is great work. It's very full information. I feel like we can make good decisions on this. I'm also thankful that the local boards have been so supportive. But there's the questions on the ones that are properties or dwellings. So it's obviously been looked at that it makes more financial sense to sell than to keep the... We obviously get revenue from the rent of those properties.
Through the Chair, yes, we do. We are operating on the basis that the decision was made in the last round of the LTP that where there are surplus properties which are not delivering a council service use or infrastructure purpose, that they be considered for divestment. And so that's the basis that we're operating on. Though with the properties in question here, Housing New Zealand and several iwi organisations have expressed an interest in purchasing them for housing purposes.
Okay, thank you.
Councillor Watson.
Thank you, Mr Chair. No, thanks, Letitia. I mean, a couple of questions that arise out of the ones that are being put forward for sale that are reserves, and I realise that the local boards agree with it, and in a couple of these cases they were recommended for sale in legacy council days. But just a couple of general questions that arise from that in terms of sites like this. The proceeds of that have to go into a reserve fund, but that those proceeds don't necessarily acquire new reserve land, they could just be used for maintenance of existing reserves. Is that correct?
Yes, through the Chair, it's a requirement of the Reserves Act 1977 that where reserves are sold, the proceeds of sale are maintained in reserves accounts for either the acquisition of future reserves or the maintenance of existing reserves.
Okay, so I guess that's obviously a decision for Parks, Mr. Chair, but I guess what I'm signalling here is that I don't really think maintenance of existing reserves in an era when the population's going up, there's far more intensification, is satisfactory. It should be for the acquisition of that value within that general area. Just in terms of the number of sites, there's a lot of sites like this across Auckland, you know, where there's a spare section, and I assume from these kinds of recommendations that the parks and reserves are looking at them. So all across Auckland there's plenty of sites that have, and particularly subdivisions of the 60s and 70s where there's just a spare section. When they say there's no open space benefit or no direct use as such, are they referring to like active use via a playground type setup? Is that what they mean by that?
Through the Chair, I believe what they're referring to is the criteria that was approved by this governing body in the open space acquisition policy, which is that for a neighbourhood pocket park to be acquired or continue to be held by council, it would be a minimum size of 1,000 square metres. So they're using the criteria that was approved by the governing body.
Okay, all right. And just the one final question is, obviously in instances such as this, and if conceivably other ones come up, you have neighbours and local residents who used to open space perhaps for 20 or 30 years. Now with the unitary plan, you know, they might have one dwelling, they might have 3 or 4 dwellings. And it's probably maybe not your brief, Letitia, but has in any of the conversations, has there been any comment made as to how that might be handled with respect of the neighbours? Because obviously this is going to come as a shock, an open space that may have got used in some form or another, and suddenly it's gone, and it's been vested as a reserve, and clearly there's no legal requirement then in terms of the councils having received from developers, though developers might also have a view on land that's vested in reserve then being sold. What is our approach with respect of the residents? I know there's consultation, but with other groups, I'm assuming there's not with them.
Through the Chair, what we're seeking from the Finance and Performance Committee today is approval to commence the reserve revocation process for the 2 sites which are reserves. That will include public consultation with all the adjoining landowners and public notification in the New Zealand Herald. If there's any objections raised, it would then go to a hearing. It would go back to the hearings committee here. There would then be an independent commissioner sought. The objections would be heard. If there were any issues, it would continue to be brought back to the relevant governing body committee.
Okay, thanks. Thank you.
And I think Councillor Hulse would be hearing what you're saying about purchasing and maintaining parks and using the money. So, noted. Councillor Darby.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Look, I'm happy to second if your intention is to move it.
Yes.
And thank you. I'll put the second there. Look, I just want to acknowledge the local board willingness here. I think it's remarkable. We've had some big shifts in this area as local boards and ourselves have come to understand the importance of putting these non-strategic assets to market. And probably my question, I've got a couple of questions in regard to Panuku's position when it goes to market and entertains sale agreements. Is there any scope to ensure that particularly the vacant sites are actually developed rather than land banked by the end purchaser? What do we discuss that with the market when we go to it, or do we just put it to market and look to achieve best price as opposed to a development outcome?
Through the chair, it depends on the size and nature of the site. So particularly for the sites that we consider development sites, which our development team are working on, we definitely seek certain outcomes. We have terms and conditions which are written into agreements. When we seek tenders, it's not just based on what the sale price is, but on what will be delivered. For some of the smaller sites, we have less control over it, and we do have that tension between how much time and money we actually want to invest in ensuring a certain outcome for something that may deliver, say, 500,000, 600,000 to council, versus for the larger development sites where we know we can get an optimal outcome for council and the community.
Thank you. And just for Ms Tyndall, and you, Chair, the timing of the report on the possible reinvestment of revenues from disposals in the unlock categories, what is the timing of that work? That's on the work program for the next meeting, is it?
I think the next meeting, or it might be the meeting after, they're coming back about Avondale. Whether it's coordinating at the same time, I'm not quite sure. We'd have to come back to you on that. So I know that we're going to try and get Avondale up first, and then either at the same meeting or the next meeting be bringing up the issue of optimising the unlock.
I thought we were going to do it on a region-wide basis and avoid doing it on an ad hoc basis.
Yeah, no, the intention is to do both. It's just Avondale's coming up next. And sorry, Sue can...
Sorry, Chair, my understanding is the same as the Chair's, that it will be done on a regional basis, but needs to be coordinated. That's a question that I think we should take up with Panuku and report back in terms of to confirm that they are going to be able to meet that timing.
Thank you. Briefly, and I'll close off, there's a lot of anticipation with local boards to finish that work off and land at a point in an agreement around this table on the possibility of ring fencing the disposal monies in the unlock categories as they are in the transform. So look out for that work.
Councillor Darby, it's probable that our final sign-off on that will be an LTP issue, because that does cause a considerable rejig of budgets. So it'll come to us, but whether we finalise it at that meeting or whether that just becomes something to inform the LTP is more likely.
Thank you.
Councillor Fletcher.
My question has been asked, Mr. Chair.
Councillor Simpson.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I just want to add my congratulations to the local boards and you as a team for putting this together. Just a small question on recommendation D. It says that the final terms and conditions be approved under the appropriate delegations. What are they?
Through the chair, the delegations to the Panuku board to negotiate the final, or to agree the final terms and conditions.
Oh, cool, to the board, right.
Member Kake.
Kia ora, everyone. So it is the position of the Independent Māori Statutory Board to support the disposal of the properties, but in that Panuku explores the potential for iwi housing agencies to pursue the commercial interests. The question is to seek clarification on whether and how Panuku could potentially use its commercial advisory fund to assist iwi housing agencies to explore their commercial interests in the property. Well, is there any intent? And the other point is thank you for your comments around the Mātāwaka engagement. I think it could be beneficial, much wider than just this topic.
Through the chair, I would have to take some advice on how we use that fund from either Alan Young, Director of Development, David Rankin, who's our Chief Operating Officer, or Roger McDonald, our Chief Executive, and respond at a future date to you.
Could that be responded directly to the independent, to Brandy? Thank you.
Yep.
Through the chair, could you just repeat the question so I ensure that
I'll give it to you, eh? Yep.
Fantastic, thank you.
All right, well, any further comment by councillors? Right, all sweetness and light. Well, we've got a mover and we have a seconder. I'll put them all as a block. All those in favour?
Aye.
Aye.
Against? Never has it been so easy.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Councillors.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.